Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. My name is Kellen with Apex Archery, and it is nearly the new year, meaning all of the manufacturers have released their new flagship offerings for 2025. Starting us off this year, we're going to dig into the brand new Mach 33 DS from the folks over at PSE, a homegrown carbon offering for those of us here in the States. Really carrying forward a lot of their new riser design technology from the Mach 30 DS that had released last year, but now in a longer axle-to-axle platform. Cannot wait to get this thing in for test. Let's get into it. All right, welcome back everyone. Let's dig into the specs for the Mach 33 DS, coming again from Precision Shooting Equipment based out of Tucson, Arizona. This is again a US manufactured carbon frame on the Mach 33 DS. The axle-to-axle length on this particular model is claimed at 33 inches, boasting a brace height of 6 5/8 with an IBO speed rating of 335 feet per second coming out of that EC2 cam system. That cam system will support draw lengths ranging from 25.5 inches all the way out to 31 inches, and the let-off is module adjustable between 80, 85, and 90%. All of that performance is coming in with a claimed system weight of 3.9 pounds with an MSRP of $1,899. Before we dig in and actually begin analyzing and measuring some of the different specs for this bow, I would like to pause and give a quick shout out and thank you to effectively the sponsor of this channel, and that is Bear Creek Archery in Inglewood, Colorado. They are again loaning us all of the different bows that we are analyzing this year, and it absolutely would not be possible to do these reviews without them. They are the shop that I trust for all of my archery needs, so if you are traveling through or live here in Colorado, I would encourage you to go check out my friends over at Bear Creek Archery. All right, let's dig in and begin examining this Mach 33 DS. So the first thing we're going to do is verify the actual axle-to-axle measurement that we are getting out of this particular bow. So measuring from center of axle on both sides, this one is coming in a little bit long at almost exactly 33 1/4 inches. So just a little bit longer than that claimed specification. Next, we will go ahead and check into that brace height, measuring from the deepest part of the throat of the grip out to the center of the string. And this one is coming in at exactly 6 5/8. So really nice job on that. Next, let's go ahead and look into the riser length. Remember, if you've been following this channel, you know that I do prefer a longer riser relative to the axle-to-axle measurement on any given bow. I really think of the riser itself as being my vertical orientation stabilizer, keeping a lot of the mass of the system out away from my hands and the central shooting position. So if I do measure from the pivot point, where the limbs are actually supported to the riser assembly, this is coming in at 28 7/8 inches. So 28 7/8 inches for a riser. On the shorter side for what we're seeing increasingly within this category, but very much in keeping with what some other manufacturers are doing. That does give us a riser to axle ratio of 86.8%. So again, a little bit on the shorter side for what we might expect to see. Next, I would like to check into the reflex. The reflex is again that measurement from that pivot point of the limbs to the throat of the grip. The shorter that reflex measurement, the less impact that hand torque is going to have on final shot placement. So in finding our pivot point here, I am coming up with almost exactly 2.5 inches of reflex on this particular design. Next, let's look into that claimed system weight. One thing I did do is I went ahead and removed this little accessory that does come screwed into this lower stabilizer position on the bow itself, said to kill vibration. I'm going to put that back on for all of our shooting impressions because I understand that the engineers intend for this to be on the bow for shooting. But that said, some people may be running, stabilizer assemblies and things like that in that lower position rather than this accessory or taking this off. So I do want to give you a sense for how much the bow does weigh with just that particular piece removed. I am not going to remove the vibration dampeners that are actually kind of in the limbs themselves because, quite frankly, I think everyone's going to shoot their bow with those installed. Putting this on our hand scale here. This is coming in at exactly 4.10 pounds. 4.10. And just for the heck of it, let's go ahead and quickly reinstall this dampener and see what kind of weight we get with that installed in case you want to shoot that way as well. And with that installed, we are coming in at 4.22 pounds. So again, some different options for you there. Getting relatively close to that claimed 3.9 pound weight. I would suspect, again, if you were to remove some of the different accessories like the vibration dampening, maybe you could get it pretty close to that claimed 3.9 pound weight for this carbon model. The last thing we're going to look into is the limb width. The stance width, rather. A lot of manufacturers claiming that having a wider limb stance is actually going to increase stability when you are at full draw. So using our calipers here, I am seeing that that is almost right on at 3 inches of limb stance width. So a nice wide stance there compared to what we've seen from the industry. All right, with all of that measured, I'm very excited to get this guy out on the range and give you my very first shooting impressions. All right, we are outside now with the Mach 33 DS from PSE. I've got this guy set to exactly 70 pounds of peak pull weight and set to the 80% let-off position because, quite frankly, that's how I would prefer to shoot this bow. I'm going to shoot a few arrows to give you my first shooting impressions. Very kind of smooth and linear draw cycle, which PSE is known for with that round cam profile. Nice string angle, easy to find kind of the reference point, which for me is the tip of my nose on that string. A little bit of forward hop on the shot, which you would expect for a completely bare bow that is coming in, around that 4 pound mark, and a teeny bit of vibration that falls away very, very quickly. It's kind of like a high-pitched tinge right in your fingers. But again, carbon isn't notorious for picking up a lot of vibration or really kind of transmitting it, and this is completely stripped down and very, very lightweight, so not too noticeable whatsoever. Yeah, those EC2 cams are really very smooth. Very solid back wall in this 80%. I mean, I have to put like an extra 10 pounds of pull in on the let off just to get it to move about 1 millimeter or so. Very stiff back wall. Quite a bit of sound on the shot, at least to my ear. We haven't done the actual sound analysis yet, but a very kind of crisp, high-pitch shot sound. So yeah, I'd be very curious to see where this comes in on the decibel meter when we get there. Settles in very smoothly to that back wall. Nice grip, easy to kind of feel, doesn't produce too much torque. And again, just a little bit of forward movement, which we might expect for a 3.9, 4 pound bow. All right, really very kind of snappy and crisp on this guy. Let's get it inside and throw it on the draw board in the dyno and get some of the dynamic specifications for this bow. All right, we are back inside from our initial shooting impressions, and now we have the bow actually pulled on our draw board into that full draw position. We're getting ready to talk about some of the dynamic specifications, or the specifications as they change when we are on target and at full draw. One of the first things that we like to talk about is the actual kind of cam diameter and circumference. As you can see here, very kind of middle of the road in terms of the cam size from PSE, and a relatively round profile. A little bit more aggressive perhaps, a little bit more kind of oval than what we had seen from some of their older Evolve cams in the new EC2 cams that we are seeing over the last couple of years from PSE, which is where we should pick up a little bit of that speed. Overall, one of the things that I really care about is our string to string measurement. That is effectively from this loadout point, or the last point that the string is effectively supported by the cam itself. What is that measurement when we are at full draw? Because that will help to create our string angle at the back of the bow. On this particular bow, when we do measure, we get from about this point here is the last point where the string is really kind of making contact with that cam. We are getting 33.5 inches, ultimately generating about a 36.1 degree string angle. And again, I do measure from the center of the arrow through the virtual nocking point and all the way down kind of the intersecting line here from the string itself. So 36.1 degrees for that string angle. Next, we're going to talk about something that's going to be new for us this year. And one of the reasons I had wanted to start with the PSE Mach 33 this year is because their engineers are talking about, and have been for a number of years, something that they are calling FDS, or Full Draw Stability System. What they're effectively advertising is that if you measure the dynamic brace height, in my opinion, that should be the point on the cam where, again, the string is last supported in that string channel there by the actual kind of cam assembly, to the same point on the other side. They're advertising that by keeping that measurement a little bit longer and not allowing that to shrink as these limbs deflect, that it's creating a longer lever arm for the tension that we're putting into the back of the bow through that draw. A longer lever arm here between where you're grabbing the actual grip and kind of that dynamic brace height measurement. Allowing that measurement to be maintained and to stay a little bit longer is going to provide more leverage to resist torsional force, or torque, that we are applying at the grip itself. From a raw physics perspective, it does make a lot of sense. That said, I believe that they're advertising that the dynamic brace height on this bow is growing, and we didn't find that to be the case. In fact, what we found was it is identical. So using my yardstick here, you can see again, I believe that this should be measured from the last point that the string is really kind of like within that string channel and applying force to that cam. So about this point right here on the cam. And if we do measure to the corresponding spot on the other cam, you can see that that comes in right at that exact same static brace height. You can see it's right against the back of the string stop here. So we did actually put a plumb line on this before and do a measurement, and we got maybe just a little bit over, and I mean like a 1/16 over, but I would actually call it 6 5/8. So identical to the static brace height of this bow. Now, it didn't get smaller, which is what they're saying happens to a lot of other bows, and we're going to begin to measure that on a go-forward basis. Again, creating that longer moment arm, allowing the force at the back of the string to resist the torsional force that we would apply through our grip and ultimately kind of torque on the system. All right, moving forward now, let's talk about how much work is being done by these limbs. As you can see, a huge amount of limb deflection in these relatively sloped limb design. We are getting an updated axle to axle measurement of 30 1/8 inches, meaning that the total limb deflection here is about 3 1/8 inches in that system when we are at full draw. The actual draw length, as measured here in the 80% let-off position, which is again how I would probably choose to shoot this bow, is coming in at exactly 30 inches. So really nice job there. That said, if you do choose to use the 85 or 90% option, as far as the modularized let-off there, you are going to see that draw length grow just a little bit. So you may actually end up getting effectively the same speed because the draw length has grown a little bit, despite the the higher total let-off and the lower holding weight. That said, it is going to impact kind of anchor point if you know exactly where you'd like to be, and you'd like, for example, to be at that 30-inch mark. That gives us a total power stroke in this particular setting of 21 5/8 of an inch. Now if we pull up the draw force curve, we can actually see why I would describe this bow as being relatively smooth to draw. Again, a function of all of that limb deflection and the relatively rounded, smaller diameter cam system that we are seeing from PSE. You can see that it stacks in a very linear fashion, a very kind of predictable fashion, all the way to about that 25% of draw mark. Then it continues to ascend gently from there, reaching full draw weight a little bit closer to maybe 65 to 70% of the cycle itself. One of the reasons why that makes a bow feel relatively smooth to draw, that particular kind of profile to the draw force curve, is because you're accelerating your hand initially, so you want it to be very kind of predictable and linear. But once you're kind of accelerating and you're about halfway through, your effective force applied into the actual power stroke of the bow, you can continue to kind of use that acceleration to fight all the way through that peak draw weight before dropping off into the valley. That said, when you do draw the bow very, very smoothly, which you may have noticed in some of my shooting impression shots out on the range, you do see there is a little bit of a hump right there again around that peak weight before it drops off into the valley. That said, it's very predictable. I would describe the bow as overall quite smooth and something you're definitely going to get accustomed to. Now let's take a look at the area under the curve for our draw force curve. We are getting 1,216.1 total inch-pounds, or the accumulated area under the curve, the total kind of kinetic energy that we're storing in the bow that then gets returned into the arrow. That said, I'm really curious to get this thing out now on the range, and let's see how all of those dynamic specifications come together into speeds. Remember, we are looking for 335 feet per second out of this particular bow. All right, we are back out on the range now with the Mach 33 DS, set to 70 pounds of peak draw weight and the 80% let-off position. We are looking for an IBO speed of 335 feet per second. Let's start with our 350 grain arrow, which should give us that ATA spec, which should be roughly equivalent. That first arrow going 328.3 feet per second. Really very quick speeds out of the PSE. Next, we will shoot a 400 grain arrow. That going 308.5 feet per second. Last, we will shoot a 450 grain arrow. This again getting a little bit more indicative of what we'd expect a lot of people to use as an actual field arrow for a hunting bow. That going 293.7 feet per second. All things considered, really very quick speeds out of the Mach 33 DS. Let's take this bow back inside and break down some of the features for this bow. All right, we are back inside and ready to talk about some of the features of this relatively speedy bow, the Mach 33 DS from PSE. As is always the case, we don't like to take kind of just one measurement to create our speed rating for this bow. We shot 9 350 grain arrows over the chronograph. We did get a little bit of variation in that speed, but ultimately landed at an average speed of 326.4 feet per second. So that will be kind of our go-forward speed rating for the PSE Mach 33 DS for this year. All of that speed is coming to us by way of this EC2 cam system, which is highly adjustable right out of the box and readily available to kind of work on at home. You can actually make draw length adjustments on this cam utilizing the single mod that does come with it from the factory between 25 out to 31 inches. And you can actually change the let-off, as we mentioned earlier, between 90, 85, and 80% with this little assembly at the back of that module. All right, now let's talk about adjustability for this bow. So there's really kind of two different ways that you would see adjustment out of this bow to fix your paper tears and get this thing shooting arrows straight. It is a through axle assembly, which they've been doing for a long time now, should be incredibly durable, and they are utilizing their EZ220 clips system that you can actually clip on to make wheeling adjustments left and right at the cams there, again, to fix your paper tears out of this bow. In addition, they also have this split yoke system that you can see here that they've been running for several years that actually allows the different cables here to split into two different pieces, and you can put this in a press and do minor kind of twists on either side, again, to affect things like cam lean in a very clean fashion. So nice to see a little bit of innovation and carrying that through, making those micro adjustments utilizing the actual cable set there. This does come, I should mention, in various poundage options. So this, again, is the 70-pound model. However, you can get this in 50, 60, 70, and 80-pound options from the factory. And then you can use limb bolt turns, as is always the case, to really kind of fine-tune the poundage that you want to be shooting out of that platform from there. Next, let's talk about vibration dampening. So this does come pretty standard with those vibration dampeners that we expect to see kind of on the limbs there from most manufacturers, as well as this guy that is attached to the lower stabilizer mounting position. That said, I felt a teeny bit of vibration through that, what they call DFC or dead frequency carbon riser, but you would expect that for something that is so light. It was barely perceptible. I really had to look for it. And again, not something I think you're going to notice once you actually build up this bow and begin to weigh it down with your various accessories. That said, as is always the case, we do like to get a sense for the shot volume out of these bows. So we took this guy outside on the range. We did set this up with the directional decibel meter exactly 3 feet from the horizontal shooting position of the bow, and we did get 82.2 decibels. That does make this, louder compared to some of the bows that we had on test, but only by a couple of decibels, not something that's going to be super perceptible. And again, some of that sound might dissipate and leave the bow as you begin to weigh it down and build it up with various accessories like your stabilizers, your sight, your quiver, etc. All right, let's talk about some of the different kind of features of the actual riser and assembly of the bow. First, let's start by talking about rest mounting interfaces. So they do have machined on the back here a little metal tap that goes into the riser there that does allow for kind of that dovetail style rest mounting interface. And then they of course offer a traditional burger hole if you want to utilize that. So lots of different options to really allow you to kind of streamline the weight and mount directly to the back of the riser if you want to use that dovetail option. Similarly, but for the sight, they are of course tapping in here a pick rail or a Picatinny mount. That is becoming more or less the de facto standard across a lot of different archery brands going forward. So plenty of sight options readily available now and on the shelves if you want to, again, kind of integrate and centralize the weight of the actual bow. And then they do have several different kind of metal taps here on the back for your dovetail mount if you prefer to run a dovetail sight. They are utilizing a fully kind of skeletonized and machined aluminum roller guard mount there, so a very, very kind of stiff interface with the roller guards in a very traditional place and setting for this particular bow. Next, let's talk about the stabilizer options. So they are offering 2 different front mounting interfaces. One down here lower, which is where this vibration dampener is, and then one in a more traditional spot kind of right underneath the grip, allowing you to pick and choose 2 different stabilizer positions out of this bow. Again, seeing that from a lot of the different manufacturers. It should also be noted that if you do choose to use this lower position, you might have to ditch this vibration dampener, but it does allow you to get effectively a couple more inches of length of stabilizer out of the exact same bar setup that you have. It also moves a lot of the weight of the system down a little bit lower, which many different shooters prefer. And then in the back of the kind of cable guard here, we do have, or I'm sorry, the string stop, we do have a metal piece here that is threaded and tapped for utilizing a bracket to run a back bar or a V-bar setup if that is your preference. Now let's talk a little bit about the grip. Overall, I really like the profile and the size of the PSA grip. Just a little bit rounded out here, but a nice flat shooting surface right there. Allows for a very, very repeatable grip. It is also tapped here on the sides, allowing you to attach aftermarket grips that a lot of different, third-party manufacturers are making for the PSEs so that you can effectively kind of shorten things up a little bit if you want to kind of play with draw length or even change the grip angle itself. All right, so I would say all in, that is more or less our summary for the Mach 33 DS from PSE for 2025. All things considered, a wonderful option if you are interested in a lightweight, carbon fiber, longer axle-to-axle bow, again, with really respectable speeds out on the range. And that coming to you for $1,899. If you like this review, please hit the subscribe button, share it with our friends, or follow us over on Instagram. We are going to continue this year, as is always the case, with lots of reviews for longer axle-to-axle hunting bows, ultimately arriving at a best bow for 2025 within that category. We'll see you on the next one.